It's work, dude. I don't know. There's something going on with Zoom. But yeah, so when I have this log function, so this is the parameter x, and then it just logs it. But then when I call it, I can pass it an argument. And the argument can be whatever.
So would it just do the last one as the parameter, like Q?
What do you mean the last one?
Would it just, so the X, so the log equals X, the X can equal all those things you put as log? Is that what you're
I
saying?
think x is just like a variable. And when I call log yo, in that case, x is going to be yo. When I call log pizza, in that case, x is going to be pizza. When I call log q, x is going to be
Okay.
q. I could also log foods. X in this case is going to be the array of foods.
Okay.
So yeah, this is just like, I think the best way to think about parameters is, or functions. So a function is just like its own little mini app. And like I'm defining like a variable here for this function. And this variable can really be, it's just kind of like a placeholder. And then I'm actually passing the value of it when I call the function. And let's do another array. Let's do people. This can just be an array of strings too. Okay, so I can pass it the log function and it'll run it for each of these things. There's another way I can pass this there's another way I can pass a function to this. And really what I can do is I can pass what's called a anonymous function. So if this is called thing, I call that thing. See, I can name the function here and call it log, or I can just define the function right here inside of here. Right, really, it's called a anonymous function because really it's just a function without a name. So I essentially just took this code right here, I copied it, and I placed it within this for each.
That's basically like what you're doing in Ruby when you put do and then the rest of that block, right?
Yeah, it's technically a little different because the do end, it's technically not a function. It's called like a block or a proc, which is like a function, but it's technically not a function. But it's like the same idea. It's the exact same idea where, yeah, that do end, it's going to run that code. So I think for now you can kind of think of it as like the same thing. So yeah, that's what we're doing here. There we go. Now when I do it this way, when I say like people dot for each, I can call it thing now. But actually now I'm doing a for each on my people array. So I could call it thing, but I think it'd be more clear if I called this person. This comes back to like naming variables and naming parameters. It's meant like so they make sense. I mean, I could call this X. It's just a function definition. That's just a parameter. I can call it whatever, but people dot for each X, that's really not readable. People dot for each person, that's more readable. This one here, I'm calling thing. Because yeah, this could be like anything. It could be numbers, it could be a string, it could be an array, because it's pretty generic. But for this one, I'm defining the function within this for each. And this is generally how we're probably going to do it, is like this way, where we define a anonymous function. So here we could pass a define function. Or we can do an anonymous one. So I'll slack this out. All right. Now I'm going to assign just this to an array. God, I keep writing var. Sorry, let. Because I want to know what does for each return. So this is going to be important when we're talking about what these return. So let's just see what it does. For each returns dot 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 dot. Let's drum roll. Let's console.log this. Undefined. So for each goes through each thing in the array, performs the function, you pass it, and at the end returns undefined. So this is each method's good. Like if you have an array and you want to go through each thing and you want to put that out to a console like you've been doing in your homework, right? That's a good method for that case. And it doesn't return anything. I think in Ruby it might return the array itself. I think in Ruby, yeah, but it doesn't, we're going to say it just returns undefined. Like we don't really care. So it really doesn't return anything. A value. All right, let's look at the map function. I'm going to do something similar. Let's change up this function. So I'm going to have a const double num. This is a very simple function that just takes a number and it's going to return the number times 2. So if I call double num and I pass it 3, what is that going to be?
Should be 6.
Yeah. So let's just console.log that. There we go. There's our 6. Cool. So let's take our numbers. And let's do the for each, and let's do the double num on here. Let's see if this does anything. And I'm going to comment out all of this stuff minus the numbers because I'm going to need that. Okay, so I do numbers dot for each, Now I put double num here. Now this just returns number times 2. So it's not really putting anything to the console. And yeah, it's not really doing anything. But what happens if I switch this to a map? I pass it this double num. Once again, it is actually going through all these things and it's returning this. Still nothing useful yet, but let's assign this to a variable. The result of the map function. And I'll just call this like Z for now, just because we're not sure what this is. It's console.log Z. So now so I set Z equal to numbers.map, and then I pass it this function. And this is going to return a new array 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Well, that's just my number arrays doubled. So map goes, I'm just going to copy this definition because it's really close. So map goes through each thing in the array and performs the function. You pass it, and it adds the return value. Let's say this, and it pushes. Let's use and it pushes the return value of that function into a new array, ... and at the end returns that new, make this uppercase because it is a new array. So map goes through each thing in your array. It performs the function, you pass it. And then whatever this function returns, it's going to push that to this new array that it's creating. And then once it's done going through each thing and returning each new value to that new array, once it's done, then it finally returns that new array. Does that make sense? So map is good if you want to take an array of things, create like a new array and update it. So map's going to be good to like update stuff or change things. And my numbers, if I log my numbers is unchanged. So none of these methods are going to change the array you called it on. It's going to leave that array unchanged. Let's do another example. Let's say like the strings. So this could actually, and let's change this name. This could be like double numbers or something. So that's what it's doing. It's a double numbers array. Let's do another map. Let's like map over our foods. So we could do new foods array or something equals foods.map. And this time let's pass it a anonymous function. So this is what I always do in JavaScript. I just stub out this arrow function. It's just parentheses, and the arrow, and then our square brackets. And then I want to define my parameter here. So since I'm going through a foods array, I'm going to just call that food. And then I want to return let's just do my food
Where is the maps going to again? I'm kind of confused.
I'm not sure what you mean by that question.
When it says dot maps, is that linking to something?
So map is just a function, right? So foods, this foods is a array. And on arrays, I could do something like length. Right, let me just do this. So in JavaScript, you can actually run your node command in your terminal to kind of do the same thing you do with IRB. So I could say like X equals, array 1, 2, 3. Now arrays have methods built into them, .length. And so forth. So map and for each, these are just functions on that array. So x.map, hey, that's a function. So that's what's going on there.
I think I just get caught up on what a function is just like. I don't quite understand what a function, it's just, it just is there, I guess.
Yeah, so we're using JavaScript. JavaScript was developed by people and they created this language that has all this built-in functionality. Like we can do like plus, minus, we can use strings, arrays. And yeah, with things like, when they decided to build strings, they decided to put methods on those. So we can call methods on these types of data. And map is just one that they defined for us. And where some of these functions can get confusing in JavaScript, well, not really confusing, but it's a lot of these functions can take functions, and that's all we're doing here. So this foods, that's just in an array. So I could actually just throw this array out right there. So take this array, map over it.
I guess what I mean is, what does map mean? Is that something you can like throw into anything and it would be like, oh, this is what map does in JavaScript?
This is, yeah, map goes through each, this is what I was like right here. Map goes through each thing in the array, performs the function, you pass it and pushes the return value of that function into that new array. And at the end of going through each thing, it returns that new array. So that's what map does. That's a mouthful and that might take a second to understand, but
so like our contacts, when you're adding a name to the contact and adding that to a new array because you added that to the contact.
That's not, if you're adding something to an array, I guess I'm not sure.
If you wanted to make a whole new array, like an updated list, you could use the map to make a whole new updated array with the new names, correct? And it would print out that new array.
It's not something you'd want to use to add something to an array. Because we're not, if I see how I printed this one, here's my numbers array, there's 5 numbers. My doubled array has 5 numbers. If I want to add something to an array, I'm going to use the push method or like the unshift method. Map is used if I want to go through my array and change it somehow. Like this one, I'm doubling the values. Let me show you, so let's say we have an array of strings. Let me show you where the map might be useful, like with JavaScript and HTML. So we have an array of strings. Well, let's say we want to convert that to some HTML. So we could go through our array of strings and we could convert that to HTML using the map function. So I could go through all my foods and put them in an H1 tag. So let's say this, let's call this let foods HTML. And we'll log Farm Foods HTML. Does that make sense? Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
it would go through the foods and each one it would make, okay, yeah. Mhm. So it's taking the array and changing it to whatever you set it to in the return.
Yeah, exactly. So it goes through each thing, and for each thing, it's going to return that thing, and it's going to push it into a new array.
Very cool. Okay, thank you.
So we're gonna use the map function a ton in React, because we're gonna get a lot back data that looks like this. I mean, it's probably going to be arrays of objects, arrays of hashes. We're going to map over that data and convert it into, it's not technically HTML, but we're going to convert it to this HTML looking code. And then React's going to be able to take that array of HTML and then display it to the browser. So it's a very convenient way to go from like that object, looking data into HTML. So that's the map. So, and these are great questions, because this is like, or even saying like, oh, well, the map is something you would want to add something. These are very good distinctions to make. It's like, no, map, it's not adding something, it's changing it. So if we want to add something, because what we're going to start doing, and you did this with your homework, it's called Crud Actions, where this stands for create. So that would be like adding a contact to your list. There's read, that's like displaying your list of contacts. There's update, that would be updating a contact, and then there's delete. So there's these CRUD actions. So if we're talking about arrays and we're trying to do CRUD actions, if we want to create, that's generally going to be push. We'll use like the push method. We'll push something onto an array. We want to read, depending on what you're doing, that could be map or update. For update, map, sorry, I said this wrong, map or for each, depending. For update, we're going to see, once we get to React, we're actually going to use map for that. For now, you could just you can find the index of the array and change it, but. So we're kind of going to see these methods when we get to React.
So like, for instance, if you were doing the contact list and you wanted to edit the contact list, and we were doing that in JavaScript, you could use map to change it in some way. Or maybe I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, let me show you how you would. Because there's two ways to update our people array, right? Let's say we have the index. Like I just know I want to, we have this let index and it's 1. We get that from the user, we get that from the UI. I want to update the index to 1 and the updated name is going to be equal to, we get this from the UI has changed. Now, the way I could do this is just to, grab the people, grab that index and set that equal to updated name. So here we could console.log people, go in and change the name and console.log it. So there's Jim, John, Sally. We go through, we grab the index, we change the name, it's changed. Right? So that's how you're doing it, and that's fine. But when we get to React, so I'll say this, when we get to React, we can't do it this way because it mutates the array, it changes it. And React's going to be like, no, don't. This is a little hard to just kind of take my word for it, or just say this is just how it is. So if I have this array, React's not going to want me to change it. What it's going to want me to do is give it a new array. It's kind of a concept of functional programming. It's like you don't mutate this state. You have to get back new state. So this would violate this rule. Because this, and for now, you don't have to worry about that. Like if you want to do it this way, that's fine. That's like a good way to do it. But now all of a sudden, when we get to React, we're not going to, React's going to like break if we try to do it this way. So what I want to do is, well, I need to go create a new array. So I'm going to call it updated people. And I'm going to set that equal to my people.map. So I'm going to go through each person. I believe we have an index actually with the map. Let me just see. We're normally going to do this with an ID. Yeah, so we do have an index. So I can do person.map. I can also give it a second parameter, which would be the index of the array. So I could do something like this. If the index, and I'm overloading this, I'm going to call this I because I'm already using the index. If I equals index right here, this one. So let me make this smaller. So let's say the person I want to update is the one with the index of 1. So if the I, so this is the I is the index, let's call this index, or let's call this current index. That's like the thing we're currently iterating over. If this equals index, and I'll call this index of person. Oh, now I'm using camel case or snake case. Not that it matters, just trying to be consistent. Index of person to change. It's going to make these really explicit variable names. So if the current index equals the index of person to change, let's return our updated name. Else, I don't even need the else because of what we talked about earlier, or I can just return the person. This is how we're going to have to update our array of contacts in React. We have to go through, even if it's just one contact, we would have to go through our whole array. We have to find, and really what's going on here, we're finding the one person to update. And here, we're just returning the original values of the person, like, because they don't need to be updated. I know the syntax might be a little confusing, but at a high level, does Does this make sense? So we go through each of our things in the array and we only want to update one of them. We find that thing. And then for that one, that's going to be the updated value. And for everyone else, we're just going to return it as it is. But we have to create a new array of people because that's just how it is going to work with React. There we go. There's that array. So the other ones, so if I get rid of this thing, so I can console.log my updated people and console.log people. See, my people array hasn't been changed. My updated array has. And that's going to make React happy and not complain at me. How's that? This is, I know this to me, I think this is this is not easy to wrap your head around. And I think one of the hardest parts with JavaScript too is just the syntax. This is a little messy, I think, when you're learning it.
Yeah, personally, I think Ruby's a little easier to, it's like more simplistic to follow visually.
Yeah, I kind of like, well, I learned Java first. That was, I think you kind of like have a preference towards one of like the first languages you learn. And Java is a lot like this. So like the square brackets. And, but yeah, Ruby is a really clean, really neat. They have a lot of like syntax, it's called syntactic sugar. Like you can get Ruby looking really clean. All right, so there's the map. There's some examples of the map. Let's look at some examples of the last one, and that is filter. So once again, I'm going to just kind of copy this map definition. So we have filter. Since we're running low on time, I'm just going to go through this. And I'll just kind of go through this quickly. So filter goes through each thing in the array and performs a function. So these methods are all going to do that. They go through each thing in the array and perform the function you give it. But the different thing with filter is this function needs to return a Boolean. So the function you give the filter method has to return true or false. Because what it does, if that function returns true, it will push that thing in the new array. If it returns false, it doesn't. Let me do the dot, dot, dot. And at the end of the array, at the end, once it finishes going through each thing, it's going to return that new array of the stuff that's been filtered. That's why it's called the filter method. And in Ruby, it's called the select, because you're selecting the things you want to keep. Filter, or you're filtering out the things you don't want to keep. So let's look at this. Let's go through our numbers. And that's called a filter. And so let's go through each num. It's a number. And then I could say something like this: return number. All right, let's say I want to return all the even numbers. how do I figure out if a number's even?
Modulus 2.
Yeah, I can do the number, because in Ruby, there's an even method. There's no methods on numbers in JavaScript. But if we want to find out if something is even, yeah, we can see, hey, does modulus 2. So does the remainder, so modulus is the remainder of division. So like, does everyone know that? I think we kind of talked about that. Like 3 mod 2 is going to be 1 because 2 goes into 3 once with a remainder of 1. So it gives back the remainder of division. So this is how we can figure out if something's odd or even. Because if the number if a number divided by 2, if it doesn't have a remainder, then that's an even number. So math logic right there. So this whole thing, when I look at this whole function, lines 67 through 69, this in my mind, what type of data is this once this is done?
Booleans?
This, it's
It's-
not a Boolean, that's. So this isn't.
It'll be a new array, right?
Yeah, this whole thing, once it gets done, it gives me back that array. So this whole thing is say, I can't always say like is in array. Such a tongue twister. That is a array, so I can set this equal to a variable. I can't save that. Overwrite. All right, I don't know what's going on here. I think my computer's dying. So then I can console.log evens. I typed no, sorry. Okay, there it goes. There. So there's my evens. 2 and 4. So let's, now that we kind of see this, so we go through our numbers and I can just throw these here too. I can, if this is a little easier to understand, if I just have the array right there. We go through each thing in the array and we perform this function, which returns true or false. If it returns true, then we're going to keep the thing. We're not going to change the thing, we're just going to keep it. So this is a way how we can take in an array and then just filter it down to a smaller array of the same thing. I mean, I could say something, and this can be anything. I just say number greater than 3. So if I want to get all my numbers greater than 3, there we go. This just has to return a Boolean. There's more of these methods like that take a function and do something. But I think for now, these 3 are going to be the most common.
The 3 being map, filter, and what was the other one?
Oh, sorry, I slacked that to just Kelsey. Let me slack this out. It's for each. So you can technically, well, I'm not even going to say that. I was going to say you could technically do everything with the for each, but I don't want to make things complicated. There's also another one called reduce that you can do everything. You can do all of these things with the reduce, but I think they have these methods because they have the map method, they have the filter method because they do a specific thing, and it just makes your code more readable. So for each is, you just want to go through each thing and do a thing. It's going to return nothing, but you can still go through each thing and perform a function. Map goes through each thing. It updates that thing in some way, it changes it, and then it's going to return that updated thing and push it into that new array. So if you have an array of 5 things, it's going to return a new array of 5 things, of 5 updated things. The filter method is going to go through each thing. It's going to perform that function. That function needs to return true or false. If it returns true, it says, hey, keep that thing in the new array. If it returns false, then it says, hey, discard it. And all of these methods don't change the original array you performed it on, which is going to be very important when we get to React.
So like maps, it just creates, basically it can replace a new one, right?
It doesn't replace, it creates a new one. And that's like,
Right.
yeah.
So it's still there because it's a constant.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I could make this a let. It doesn't matter that this is a constant or it just doesn't change the original thing that I called it on.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's just do these really quick in Ruby, just so we can see the difference. And I select those all out. Now there's a couple different ways to write these in, well, there's kind of 2 main ways in Ruby, but I'm just going to do it in one way. So we have a number array. So now we're back in Ruby land. And I'm just going to do this on our numbers. So we have the dot each. So yeah, someone's saying this is, it's kind of like the do end where this is a function, and that I think is close. It's not exactly the same. This is not exactly a function, but for now, let's just think of this as a function. I think we can kind of hide away some of the details. So we have our each loop. And yeah, I'm not sure. I think Ruby does actually return just the array. But let's run this demo, or sorry, Ruby demo.rb. Yeah, so we go through each thing and puts it out. And Ruby just being Ruby, it's just going to, this thing is just going to return this array. So it's kind of pointless because I already have that array. So .each, you're not really concerned about the return value, is what I should say, in JavaScript or Ruby. But we could do that, like, so if we do our double numbers, we do the map. It's the same thing, we can do num times 2. Now we're not going to use the return keyword here. Oop, I need to put that out. See, there's our doubled array. I actually think if I use the return keyword here, that it screws things up. Yeah. If I actually, this is where it's a little different than a function because it's not return, like if I use the return keyword here, I think it stops this from happening. So we actually do not want to use in these blocks, we don't want to use the return keyword. But it's still the same thing. I'm mapping over it, do number, just, hey, return number type. Just return, it's going to return the last thing. And then we could do our evens. Same thing, it's not called filter, it's called select. So there's actually an even method on numbers in Ruby that returns it. Since it ends in a question mark, I know that returns a Boolean. So is this number even? That will return true. Go ahead and keep it. If not, don't. Even. Evens. There we go. See, the syntax is a little different, the name's a little different, but they're doing the same thing. So throw those out in Slack. Cool. Questions on that? Go through these methods. You will, we will be using these a lot, so. Let's maybe do one more quick demo in JavaScript. Just gonna delete this. Just an array of people. So I'm gonna have my people array. And you're gonna see this is, it's technically an array of objects in JavaScript, but it's gonna look very similar to what we did in, Rubies and hashes. So we have an ID, we have a name. We can kind of have any kind of data inside of here. All right, so I have my people array. I have 2 objects in there. They all have the same keys, ID, name, foods, which are all the same data type. ID is a number, name's a string, and foods is an array of strings. Just kind of want to look at so let's say I want to delete a person and create a new array. So it's called filtered array equals my people dot map, or sorry, filter. So it's for each person. I'll just call it P for person. Let's say we have like let's just hard code this for now. Let's say like return p.id does not equal 1. And let's do like 3 people in here just so we can just remove 1 person. So this is going to go through my people. And if my person.id does not equal 1, it's going to keep them. So this is going to delete everyone. Sorry, this is going to keep everyone except for the ID where it's 1. that's wrong one. Node demo.js. Hope I have two with the same ID. See how that is now just giving me that array back with that ID of 1, but the ID 1 missing. This is what I want.
Is the exclamation point what's the word, syntax to get rid of it? Is that what that means?
No, this is I'm checking to see. It's kind of like I'm seeing if something's equal. So I could say, hey, does the ID equal 1? Or I could use the not in front of it and say, does it not equal 1? So it's a way to ask if something does not equal.
Quick question. Why don't you need a let or a const on line 7?
I mean, I should have a let or a const.
Oh, okay.
It's yeah, JavaScript. If I'm just like have a single file, like it is going to work. We will see instances. So we're going to be doing this kind of stuff inside of a function, then we would need the let or const. But yeah, for now, like with this one, it would work. So it's one of those things. I should have that. It's not going to break it in this case, but it's going to break it in other cases, which we haven't talked about. Okay, so let's write a function called remove person. This takes a index. And I mean, technically we could have this take an array too. Or let's have this actually take an ID. So I could almost just take this code that I did here, paste it inside of here. But I'm going to want to change a couple things up. So first of all, I don't want it to be this people array. I just want it to be the array that was passed. So now I can take any array. And I don't want to hard code this one. Now I want it to take that ID. And there's my filtered array. And then at the very end, I can return this. So now I have a function, remove person, where I could pass it the ID and the array. Assign that to a variable. Just call it X for now. There we go. Now I can, pass it 3, and it removes that ID. Select this example out. So I think when we give out the homework today, it's probably going to be, there's a lot of stuff to do. I'm going to just suggest you try to get chunks of it done, but I think a lot of some of it might be a little confusing. So with those confusing parts, bring those questions for lecture tomorrow. Because I feel it's kind of good for you to bang your head against your desk just a little, get a little stuck, get a little confused. Then we can clarify on Friday, some of these questions. And then you're going to have 4 days to work on this. So it's really going to get down these concepts that we've talked about: functions, arrays, data structures, if statements. So it's just some good time to practice. And yeah, and because tomorrow we'll talk a little about Git and GitHub. We'll get you set up with those, and then we'll have some time for review. Any questions now on this though? How are you feeling like on a scale of confusion or goodness of like the down to up? Got some going from here to there. That's good. Okay.
I'm in the middle. Yeah.
I like that. Middle to up range. That's what I hope. If you're down, that's fine. Let us know. We can, like I said, this stuff I think you have to learn. You have to like kind of have someone explain it to you and kind of maybe 30% of it sinks in. Then you go try it out and then you kind of find out where you're confused. And then you like get exposed to it again and then it just makes a little more sense. And then for the homework, I also have like articles, links to other articles. I think it's good to like get different perspectives on it, read about it. So we'll get you caught up on this. Cool, but that is it for me, unless if there's no more questions, we can take lunch. Cool. Well, let's come back at 2 and yeah. Everyone have a good lunch. Go get some Thai food or something. Go to Mai Tai. They have
That's a good idea.
I live like a block away from there, so it's a go-to for me.
Nice.
Thank you.
Sweet. Have a good one.
See you in a bit, everybody.
See ya.
See ya. Yeah. Yeah, back.